Have you ever felt the entire fate of a galaxy hinge on a single heartbeat? In this story, we witness impossible courage when two unlikely allies, burdened by ancient secrets and wartime betrayals, forge a fragile trust against all odds. In the midst of explosions rocking a starship's corridors, one fleeting, selfless gesture changes everything, setting off a chain reaction that could end centuries of conflict or seal the doom of countless worlds. If you're ready to see how a chance meeting sparks a cosmic shift and whether compassion can truly triumph over ancient grudges, stay tuned to hear the entire unfolding saga. Before diving into the full adventure, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. By subscribing, you'll not only support our effort to bring you more captivating stories, but also ensure you never miss a thrilling update. Prepare yourself for a tale of defiance, sacrifice, and the stirring warmth born amidst the coldness of war, because this story's climax will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. A volley of plasma bursts rattled the steel panels of the wounded battleship, each reverberation reminding Orin of how close the galaxy stood to the brink of chaos. He crouched behind a console half destroyed by enemy fire, the acrid smell of scorched circuitry searing his nostrils. Sparks sputtered overhead, dancing in the half-lit corridor that felt unnervingly claustrophobic. Their brilliant arcs illuminated the ragged edges of torn metal, revealing fleeting glimpses of Orin's sweat-streaked face and the weapon clutched in his hand. The heavy throb of his heartbeat merged with the wail of sirens, creating a tapestry of urgent sound that refused to relent. Despite the volley of alarms, he forced himself to remain focused, remembering the directive he had received directly from his superiors. Retrieve vital intel from this disputed sector before it fell under hostile control. His name was Orin Felmore, and although he had served multiple tours in multiple systems, nothing had prepared him for the multi-faction war currently blazing through the stars. Conflicts stretched across light years, with delicate treaties shattered under the demands of self-serving warlords. Humanity, together with other civilizations of the known galaxy, was caught in a precarious dance of alliances, most of them formed from desperation rather than true trust. Yet Orin had also heard whispers about a reclusive figure, a queen of shadows, whose very existence teetered on the edge of legend. He wasn't sure if the stories were tall tales conjured by lonely soldiers or if there was truth woven into the rumors. The conflicting reports, though, agreed on one thing. If anyone could influence the tides of war, it was she. A crackle in his comm device snapped him out of his private ruminations. "Get moving, Orin," Lucan's voice urged. Lucan, a longtime ally, was known for his calm, analytical style that many found comforting when the galaxy's fires raged so fiercely. "We're pulling back from the forward decks," Lucan continued. "Hurry, before the next wave of hostiles arrives." Orin clenched his jaw and reassessed his surroundings. Abandoned munitions and pieces of twisted hull were strewn about, creating a perilous obstacle course. If he delayed any longer, the entire operation would be in jeopardy. And there was still another reason he had to push forward. A covert rendezvous with the elusive Queen of Shadows herself, whose real name was whispered to be Seraphina. Summoning the last vestiges of his courage, he advanced, every step feeling heavier than the last. Somewhere in the labyrinth of halls and sealed blast doors, Seraphina awaited. He knew little about her except fragments. Her presence whispered of secret powers, her realm said to be cloaked in illusions and midnight aura. Many claimed she wore a veil of sorrow from centuries of leadership over her cloistered people. Others insisted she was nothing more than a myth intended to sow fear. But Orin clung to the faint promise that if Seraphina genuinely existed, her influence might be the key to forging a final, decisive treaty that could spare entire star systems a gruesome fate. The corridor's emergency lights flickered, casting elongated shadows along the bulkheads. Making his way through the half-lit gloom, Orin felt a disquieting awareness slide across his skin, as though unseen eyes tracked his every move. While the alarms had lessened in volume, their distant drone remained an ever-present reminder of how fragile the situation had become. Each time he passed another shattered console or a ruptured pipe spewing vapor, his resolve tightened. For all the destruction, for all the fires raging across planetary surfaces elsewhere, hope might still flicker if he completed his mission. A sealed door awaited him at the end of the passage. Its surface bore the deep black scorch marks of attempted forced entries. Oren felt a subtle warmth radiate through his gloves as he placed a palm against the panel. With a hiss, the door slid open, granting him access to a room drastically different from the war-scarred corridors behind him. Dim lights, tinted a soothing blue, enveloped the chamber in an aura of calm that clashed with the chaos raging elsewhere on the ship. The hush inside was profound. In the center stood Seraphina, draped in intricately woven robes that seemed to blend into the very air around her. She presented an imposing yet regal figure. Her garments were cut from a fabric that seemed alive with shifting patterns of darkness. At first glance, her gaze appeared distant, twin pools of midnight that had seen too many sorrows. But when she turned to face Oren, recognition and curiosity sparkled in her eyes, and it was as if time itself paused to acknowledge the significance of their meeting. He took a moment to absorb the surreal calm of the chamber. It felt like a refuge carved from the tumult outside, and Seraphina was its living soul. Despite her aura of shadow and unexpected warmth radiated from her, the rumors whispered that she was known to isolate her emotions. But standing there, Oren sensed a guarded compassion behind her eyes. He cleared his throat, summoning the nerve to address her in a tone that balanced deference and urgency. "My people have asked for you by many names. Queen of Shadows is just one. We were told you might hold knowledge that could save us all." Seraphina's voice, when she spoke, retained a lilting, melodic quality that belied her imposing reputation. "I know why you've come, Oren Felmore," she said gently, as though she had rehearsed those words for centuries. "But words alone aren't enough to broker peace. Many have approached me with promises, only to betray them when the moment turned dire." Oren detected the weariness laced through her measured tone. The myriad of alliances shattered across centuries, the battered trust among star-spanning civilizations, all weighed heavily on her. The corridor's faint vibrations served as a harrowing reminder that time was short, conflict relentless. More blaster fire rattled the hull, prompting Oren to speak again, urgency fraying the edge of his voice. "We stand at the threshold of annihilation. I can't promise you a perfect outcome, but we can strive for something better than what we have now." Before Seraphina could respond, the metallic groan of stressed plating echoed from somewhere deeper within the vessel. Oren instinctively reached for his sidearm, scanning the chamber's entrance. Through his comm earpiece, Lucan's voice crackled again. "Oren, we're detecting hostiles moving toward your position. We'll try to hold them off, but you need to hurry. The warship's integrity is compromised." Seraphina inclined her head, indicating the concealed exit at the far side of the room. Her voice remained soft, even if an undercurrent of tension passed beneath her calm exterior. "Follow me," she said, stepping toward a barely visible door that slid open with the whisper of sensors. The room beyond was dimly lit by clusters of bioluminescent crystals embedded in the walls, an architectural choice reminiscent of an era long forgotten. They emerged into a hallway that felt strangely organic, the steel plating replaced by curving forms reminiscent of ancient temples lost to time. Oren's pulse quickened as he realized they were entering a sector of the vessel possibly reserved for clandestine gatherings, perhaps a domain unlisted in official schematics. Every step echoed with a hush, as if even the floor itself conspired to keep their presence secret. Seraphina paused, her gaze turning to Oren. "I have lived too long in isolation," she admitted, her previous stoicism cracking enough to reveal subdued regret. "But we are at a turning point. The conflict that rages today has roots in betrayal centuries old. If nothing else, I want to spare future generations the anguish of inherited hatred." Oren nodded, absorbing her words. He had studied volumes of historical data about interplanetary wars, though none seemed as all-consuming as the one now raging. The bits he knew about Seraphina's species hinted at an advanced civilization that once spanned far corners of the galaxy. But over the ages, distrust and paranoia had eroded their alliances, driving them into isolation. The images of broken treaties and shattered alliances flickered across his mind, each an unhealed scar on the tapestry of galactic history. Suddenly, a surge of new adrenaline coursed through him. A distant clang reverberated, marking the approach of unknown figures. Seraphina held up a hand, halting him. Shadows stirred ahead, and two shapes materialized. One tall, lean, with eyes set close and cautious. Selvik, an envoy from another species rumored to have a stake in preserving this fragile peace. Standing next to Selvik was Avery, Seraphina's confidant, a diplomatic attaché who also served as her bodyguard. Oren Fellmore, Avery said, tone-guarded, though free of hostility. We wondered if you'd truly accept this summit. The corridors are overrun with infiltration squads. We must move quickly to safer ground. Selvik nodded, eyes flicking toward Seraphina, then back to Oren. Your presence here is a gamble. If word spreads, the extremist factions might brand you a traitor to your own. Or worse, they'll see Seraphina as an accomplice to everything they oppose. Still, we believe this conversation is worth that risk. An unspoken tension pulsed among them. Momentarily, Oren glanced back, recalling the carnage behind him. Sealed blast doors might have held the conflict at bay, but they wouldn't last forever. He fixed his gaze on Seraphina. Show me what we need to know, he urged quietly, unafraid of the path ahead, but wary of how fleeting their window for action truly was. She led them deeper into the warship's labyrinthine interior, weaving through chambers where luminescent glyphs covered every available surface. Some glowed softly in the subdued light, while others remained faint, suggesting they were tied to ancient technologies only partially functional. Oren wondered if these glyphs were inherited relics from Seraphina's forebears, or if they represented ongoing experiments to harness cosmic energies. Perhaps both. His mind whirred with questions. Had these halls been built for quiet reflection or for covert operation? Avery scanned the walls, occasionally touching a glyph and muttering an incantation in a language Oren didn't recognize. Seraphina advanced with purpose, her presence guiding them like a living lodestar through the faintly pulsing corridors. Selvik followed close, visibly uneasy, glancing over his shoulder every few steps. The tension in the air heightened each time a distant explosion reverberated through the ship's skeleton. At length, the narrow passage opened into a circular chamber that felt oddly sacred. A faint glow illuminated a spherical console at its center, surrounded by a ring of 8 pillars, each inscribed with swirling patterns. Despite his usual composure in tactical situations, Oren found his breath catching. This space exuded an aura of solemnity, as if echoing with centuries of prayers and laments. Seraphina approached the console, placing her palms gently against its surface. We call this the Cipher Archive, she explained. Her voice was hushed, filled with reverence. It houses our greatest secrets, agreements struck under star-laden skies, treaties broken when ambition overshadowed wisdom, and the heartbreaks that followed. No outside faction has ever been granted access, but I have made an exception tonight. We cannot continue shadowed by half-truths and unspoken regrets. A thin beam of light arced from the console, projecting a 3-dimensional map of contested regions across the galaxy. Oren's eyes widened, recognizing specific zones he had only read about in classified files. Here, though, the data was far more comprehensive, detailing forgotten alliances that might be revived and potential vulnerabilities in the most aggressive warlords' fleets. He realized immediately the magnitude of this resource. An unstoppable advantage might be gleaned from it, if used honorably. Avery spoke softly, turning from the glowing console to regard Oren. Information alone doesn't create peace. Trust does. We open this archive to you, but we demand a promise that you will not use it to exploit our people, or any species still recovering from past betrayals. Oren nodded, voice resolute. I will not betray this trust. The entire reason I am here is to end the bloodshed, not perpetuate it. Seraphina's dark gaze found Oren's. In the dim flicker of the console's light, something in her softened. Hope, perhaps, or gratitude. The galaxy has nearly burned itself out on broken packs, she said quietly, her voice resonant with sorrow. Let us not repeat the old cycle. Our time is short, and the cracks in this warship run deeper than its armor plating. If we are to prevail, we must unify swiftly. No sooner had Seraphina finished speaking than a distant thrum of weapons fire reverberated through the flooring, rattling the pillars in the circular chamber. Dust drifted from the ceiling in lazy spirals, drawn downward by artificial gravity. Tension soared among the group. Selvik scanned the area, his shoulders tensing as though preparing for a fresh assault. Avery exhaled a hushed oath, her composure wavering only momentarily. Then all eyes turned toward Orin. He stepped up to the spherical console, inhaling deeply as though the act of focusing might quell the chaos swirling through his mind. The glowing interface changed with each flicker of his gaze, revealing hyperlanes vulnerable to blockades and star systems whose inhabitants had yet to choose a side. Tiny pulses of light indicated shifting alliances, each in flux, as faction leaders scrambled to claim or defend crucial territory. When Orin's brow furrowed, Serafina rested a hand lightly on his shoulder. The unexpected contact startled him. For an instant, that touch, warm and steady, drove away the howling conflict in his mind. It was a moment that underlined the improbable connection forming between them, two individuals from disparate worlds forced into a shared cause. "Look at the data from the perspective of unity," she murmured, her breath warm against his ear. "Not conquest." He absorbed her words, shifting his thought process. Rather than seeking the enemy's weaknesses, he looked for openings, places where ceasefires might take hold, corridors that could be used for urgent humanitarian relief, or staging areas where negotiations might be attempted without fear of immediate ambush. In the swirling map, patterns emerged, star clusters that had witnessed minimal combat, or outposts with a history of collaboration. These patterns, faint though they were, presented a framework for something better than endless war. Suddenly, Lucan's voice crackled through Orin's calm earpiece. "Enemy infiltration squads have broken through. We're pinned down near the cargo holds, Sector 5. We need backup." The urgency in Lucan's tone cut through the hush, spurring Orin into action. He turned to Serafina, Selvik, and Avery. "We have to move. Our people are running out of time." With a hurried gesture, he pulled a compact data module from his belt, syncing it to the archive systems. In moments, the essential files were transferred. The shimmering map dissolved, leaving the chamber dark and echoing. Selvik glanced apprehensively at Serafina. "We must not let them breach these archives," he said, voice quivering. "If the cycle of betrayal is to end, the knowledge here must not fall into the hands of those who only hunger for power." Serafina nodded, her expression resolute. "I will seal this chamber behind us, but that won't stop the larger threat. Orin, you must ensure your superiors understand what we stand to lose if this war intensifies. Offer them not just battlefield coordinates, but the seeds for real negotiations. I will do the same among my own." With a somber chorus of agreement, they retreated from the chamber. Serafina placed her palm on the door's control panel, murmuring an incantation. Almost instantly, heavy doors slid shut in a swirl of ancient glyphs, as though the warship itself conspired to conceal its greatest treasure. Then, plunging into uncertain corridors once more, they raced to support Lucan's beleaguered defense. Time became a blur as they navigated the twisting halls, each step haunted by the echo of footsteps chasing from behind. The relentless firefights outside Sector 5 grew louder, punctuated by screams, bursts of plasma, and the hiss of superheated metal. Occasionally, the team would pass huddled civilians seeking refuge, technicians, medics, and low-level diplomats who'd been caught in the war's merciless crossfire. Serafina paused whenever possible to direct them towards safer routes. There was a gentleness in her guidance, a maternal concern that contradicted the chilling rumors spread about her. Orin pressed his earpiece, trying to glean more details from Lucan. "We're holding them at the outer barricades," Lucan managed between short bursts of static. "But they've got specialized breaching charges. We can't hold forever." Orin's eyes narrowed. He and Lucan had seen too many standoffs turn into bloodbaths. If they didn't act swiftly, this corridor would be riddled with casualties. In the chaos, Serafina took point, her form a blur of dark fabric and fluid movement. She navigated with uncanny certainty, as though she knew the vessel's every hidden passage. Avery remained close, alternating between scanning the route ahead and checking on Selvik, who visibly struggled with the tension. Reaching a junction adorned with the same swirling glyphs, Serafina halted and crouched, pressing one slender hand against the floor. The glyphs flickered in response, activating a hidden panel. With a hiss, a side corridor revealed itself, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. "This route leads behind Sector 5's cargo hold," she explained. "We might surprise the squads from the rear." Orin nodded, quickly voicing directions. Selvik, take Avery and loop around to secure the exit point. Serafina and I will go directly to reinforce Lucan. Keep your comms open. As they split off, the quarter's walls pressed in, thick with humidity and the scent of stale, recycled air. The low throb of the ship's compromised reactor pulsed beneath their feet. Despite the tension, Orin couldn't ignore the fleeting feeling of Serafina's arm brushing against him. Even amid chaos, that warmth drew him back to the promise of their earlier conversation, forging real unity against all odds. They reached a sealed hatch. Static-laden voices drifted from beyond, punctuated by harsh orders demanding the immediate surrender of Lucan's squad. Orin's heart hammered. He silently mouthed a countdown. 3, 2, 1. He kicked the hatch open, blaster raised, stepping into the crossfire. Explosive light and sound engulfed them instantly. Lucan and his battered soldiers huddled behind the remains of cargo crates, pinned by a well-organized infiltration unit. Serafina darted into view like a dark phantom, her hands summoning an unfamiliar device that emitted pulses of disorienting energy. The enemy reeled, momentarily blinded. Orin seized the opportunity to advance, barking for Lucan's squad to hold position. In a flurry of shots and quick commands, the infiltration squad found themselves overwhelmed by a renewed defense from both angles. The same trick Serafina had alluded to. When the final enemy fighter slumped to the ground, the air stilled. Lucan's breath came in ragged gasps as he rose. Weapons still ready. Only then did the realization sink in. They had managed to save not just the corridor, but the precious access point to the deeper sectors. In the hush that followed, Orin found Serafina watching him. He sensed an unspoken gratitude, and in her eyes, relief, weighed by sorrow. Amid the debris and the flickering overhead lights, the cargo hold settled into a tense calm. Lucan's squad began attending to the wounded, and makeshift barricades were hastily reassembled in case more hostiles advanced. Soft moans of injured comrades underscored the grim reality of this quarter-turned battlefield. Pieces of molten plating glowed faintly on the floor, as if capturing the dying embers of the recent fight. Moving to a quieter corner, Orin crouched beside Lucan, who tried to wave off medical attention but couldn't hide the shallow cut across his brow. Serafina hovered nearby, her gaze flicking between the battered squads. "Casualties?" Orin asked, voice subdued. "A few," Lucan replied through gritted teeth. "We lost Vincente and Delane, friend. Others are injured but stable enough to move if we need to pull back." He winced, pinching the bridge of his nose to clear his vision. "I take it we have a bigger plan than just holding cargo bays?" Orin nodded, glancing at Serafina. "We do. We discovered a trove of archived knowledge that could turn the tide, if used responsibly. Potential avenues for diplomacy, uncovered weaknesses in the warlord's command structures. But it means nothing if we can't stabilize this sector." Serafina drew closer. Now with the immediate threat quelled, she seemed more vulnerable, allowing herself a rare moment to breathe. "I never intended for violence to meet us so soon," she said, her voice hushed. "Yet these infiltration squads, they reflect the desperation of factions who sense the old order shifting. If we can secure even a single truce, it might spark a broader reconciliation." A soldier approached, a tall, broad-shouldered woman named Drena, dragging a battered captive who wore the insignia of an enemy raiding party. "Caught him sneaking behind the crates," Drena declared. The captive's eyes darted about, defiance mingling with a flicker of terror. Orin's lips pressed into a firm line. "Who sent you? Why attack this ship?" Silence. The captive spat on the floor, refusing to divulge anything. Serafina's expression darkened, a faint aura of authority hardening her features. She stepped forward and gazed down at the captive, her presence almost tangible, like a silent pressure in the air. "Your masters might believe they can end this war through subversion and fear," she said softly, yet her voice resonated with unwavering command. "They cannot. Not while there's still enough resolve among the living to stand against them." Though unspoken, the threat lingered. Continue down this path, and more innocent blood would spill. Orin knew that historically, intimidation had rarely sowed anything but deeper grudges. Yet time was scarce, and thousands of lives hung in the balance. If one confession from this captive could prevent another boarding incursion, It might be worth the moral compromise. Aware that the entire scene weighed heavily on everyone present, Lucan nodded to a pair of troopers, who hauled the captive away for secure interrogation. For a fleeting moment, Orin allowed himself to hope. The galaxy reeled from centuries of warfare, but perhaps with the right steps, they might bend its trajectory toward genuine peace. Looking at Serafina, he offered a faint nod. Let's not lose sight of that mission. Whatever storms lie ahead, we stand together. In her quiet stare, he glimpsed both relief and the faint glow of trust. Hours later, the quarters of the battered warship lay in a brief lull from combat. Makeshift fortifications now lined every strategic choke point, and the constant flicker of emergency lighting cast unsteady shadows on bulkheads scarred by gunfire. Repair crews, medics, and wary soldiers crisscrossed the decks, trying to restore essential systems. Orin found himself back in one of the command centers, poring over data tablets strewn across a large metal table. Despite the pitched battles that had rocked this sector, he felt that for the first time in days there was a chance, albeit slim, that the tide could still be turned by negotiation rather than carnage. He glanced across the room at Lucan, whose brow remained bandaged from the earlier skirmish. Lucan gave him a nod of acknowledgement before returning to his hushed conversation with a group of engineers. The entire war effort depended on repairing a compromised reactor that powered key defensive turrets. Without those turrets, any fresh wave of attackers would break through. Meanwhile, Serafina stood beside a digital readout on the far wall, conferring quietly with Avery and Selvig. The trio's hushed voices carried tension. Lines of distrust formed from centuries of estrangement and repeated betrayals. Yet, in Serafina's posture, Orin glimpsed a new determination that swayed the usual aloofness she maintained. A beep on Orin's datapad drew his attention to an incoming transmission. He keyed in a response, and a holographic figure crackled into view. Captain Shea, one of the human fleet's more experienced officers, stationed aboard a carrier in orbit above. We've intercepted partial communications from an unknown source inside your ship, Shea said. Asir, data logs suggest a high-ranking individual could be passing encrypted intel to an enemy network. We suspect a traitor within your chain of command. I'm sending you all we have. Verify and proceed with caution. The line fizzled, leaving Orin staring at the incomplete file. If the analysis was correct, someone aboard was sabotaging their precarious alliance. Betrayals were no novelty in times of war, but in their current delicate environment, where various species were forced to cooperate just to survive, a single act of treason could unravel every thread of trust. Jaw tightening, Orin stepped away from the table and made his way to Serafina's side. She was scrutinizing a schematic of the warship's labyrinthine corridors. Our next move must be decisive, she said without turning, intuiting Orin's approach. If we repel one more infiltration, we might rally enough to force a ceasefire, or even convince a few more factions to consider negotiation. But we cannot afford chaos in our own ranks. Orin gave a grim nod. Captain Shea just warned me. There may be a mole on board. Whoever it is has been feeding movement details and strategic vulnerabilities to the raiders. We've lost too many good people and too much ground because of strategic leaks. Silence settled over them. Avery and Selvig exchanged worried looks. Serafina's features remained eerily composed, though Orin sensed the anger beneath her poise. She never claimed to be above emotions. She only buried them for the sake of her people. Now, however, he could see an edge in her gaze, as if betrayal within these halls cut her more deeply than she'd dare show. Serafina took a slow breath, nodding to Avery. Set a quiet inquiry into motion, she said, voice carefully measured. We cannot mount a public investigation. Doing so would only spook the traitor. Instead, assemble a small team of officers we trust beyond doubt. Keep your circle tight and your suspicions closer. Avery inclined her head and departed. Selvig, lingering by the console, spoke in a half-whisper. The infiltration squads we fought early recognized your presence, Serafina. I heard their calm chatter. They referred to you as the renounced sovereign. It seems knowledge of your identity has spread more widely than we anticipated. Her expression flickered, an unmistakable hurt cross-hatched by anger. In ages past, she explained softly, my family ruled an empire spanning numerous star systems. But after countless betrayals and tragedies, we receded from galactic politics. Now my name is used as both a slur and a threat, by those who cling to ancient grudges. Oren listened carefully, storing these fragments of her personal history. Prior to this mission, he had gleaned little beyond rumors about the reclusive Queen of Shadows. She was portrayed as an enigma, some pivotal figure who haunted the galaxy's oldest records. "You don't have to hold that history alone," he murmured gently. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to say it, but the weight of her solitude tugged at him, especially after all he had witnessed. The unwavering defense she provided, her concern for the innocent trapped aboard this doomed warship. She gave a small, tight-lipped smile, as though acknowledging his support, but unwilling to delve into deeper confessions. "We all bear burdens," she replied. "The real question is whether we can translate that pain into the will to heal this star-spanning rift." Before Orrin could respond, Lucan approached with urgent steps, a new file in hand. "We just finished decrypting the data from Captain Shea," he said, glancing between them. "It outlines suspicious communication logs tied to a single ID signature, someone named Commander Dalen." He paused, letting the gravity of the accusations settle. "Commander Dalen is well regarded among the human fleets. If he's truly the informant, this betrayal runs deeper than we realized." Seraphina's eyes narrowed, her posture tensing. Dalen had attended early peace talks under the human banner. Orrin remembered vague references to Dalen's role in forging alliances among smaller colonies. Could it really be the same man? The ramifications threatened to unravel every tenuous thread of unity. Selvig folded his arms. If Dalen is funneling intel, he must have an accomplice on the command deck, someone to cover his digital footprints. "We'll need more than speculation to confront him." A hush descended, pregnant with tension. Finally, Orrin straightened his shoulders. "I'll handle it. Let me approach Dalen discreetly. If he's innocent, we lose nothing by caution. If he's guilty, we might catch him before he does further damage." Seraphina's gaze lingered on Orrin, her expression acknowledging the danger in that plan. "Do it carefully," she said. "If word spreads of a suspected mole, it could sow panic among the crew. We need to keep forging alliances, not fractures." It took Orrin close to an hour to track Dalen's last known position, an ad hoc command post converted from an old briefing room near the ship's aft. He weaved through maintenance tunnels and partially collapsed corridors to avoid drawing attention, each step echoing ominously in the dim lighting. Occasional shockwaves from distant firefights rattled the hull, a constant reminder that external threats loomed even as internal discords simmered. He found Dalen hunched over a communications terminal, its screen flashing lines of code. Two exhausted aides sat nearby, scanning intelligence reports. The commander's broad shoulders and immaculate uniform exuded a sense of authority that might have been reassuring under different circumstances. Now it only fueled Orrin's unease. "Orrin," Dalen greeted, straightening. His eyes held a flicker of surprise, but he masked it quickly. "Good to see you still in one piece. The fights in the forward sectors have been brutal." "Likewise, Commander," Orrin replied. He attempted to keep his voice steady. "Your presence here is needed more than ever. We've lost a lot of ground in the last few days." Dalen nodded gravely. "My aides and I are cross-referencing sensor readings with field reports to estimate the next wave of incursions. If we can tighten our perimeter, maybe we can give the negotiation teams, whoever's left of them, enough time to broker a ceasefire." There it was, an acknowledgement of the precarious diplomatic efforts that Orrin and Seraphina championed. Orrin decided to probe lightly. "There's speculation the infiltration squads might be receiving inside data," he said, feigning a casual air. "You've heard the rumors, no doubt?" A flicker of tension shifted across Dalen's face, but he kept his composure. "Rumors are as plentiful as the debris in these corridors, Lieutenant, and almost as dangerous. We must be careful not to brand loyal officers as traitors without definitive proof." Orrin forced a small smile, his heartbeat picking up. "Absolutely. Last thing we need is paranoia. I came to see if you'd heard anything more concrete. Sometimes these leaks hide in official channels." He gestured to the blinking communications console. Dalen's gaze flicked to his aides, then back to Orrin. "Only rumors," he repeated. "I've been more focused on short-range communications. With many of our systems compromised, we barely managed to maintain contact with the repair crews." He tapped a few keys. The screen displayed a muddled array of transmission logs. "Take a look, if you like." Stepping closer to the console, Orrin felt his nerves tighten. The logs scrolled by, mostly standard-issue dispatches and urgent requests for resources or medevac units. But one line of code, slipping by almost too quickly to read, snagged his attention. The metadata matched a fragment Captain Shea had mentioned, a suspicious prefix that might route to an off-grid relay. He made mental note of the line, carefully schooling his expression. "Thanks, Commander," he said, stepping back. "We'll see if anything lines up with what the rest of the team has found." Dalen offered an almost congenial smile. "By all means, do let me know if you uncover anything." As Oren turned to leave, a chill crept down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that beneath Dalen's impeccable demeanor lurked the cunning of a man prepared to sabotage everything, for motivations yet unseen. Returning to the makeshift strategy hub, Oren found Serafina quietly engaged with Avery and Selvik over a circular holotable. Multiple star systems flickered in miniature across the display. Energy reading fluctuations, known rebel strongholds, rumored alliances, each glowed with color-coded significance. The group's discussion ceased as soon as Oren approached. He nodded at them, then exhaled slowly. "Dalen's definitely hiding something. I spotted an encrypted line in his console that aligns with the suspicious signal intercept. He doesn't realize I caught it, but if he's careful, he'll wipe all traces soon." Avery's dark brows knitted. "So we've confirmed his guilt?" "Not entirely," Oren conceded, "but it's enough to make me believe Captain Shea's intel. I don't have access rights to dig deeper without alerting him. If we confront him directly, he'll likely vanish into the ship's chaos and keep operating in secret." Selvik hissed in frustration, his long fingers tapping the table's edge. The internal sabotage could worsen at any moment. One wrong data leak, and the next infiltration wave finds our unprotected flank. We can't let that happen, but we also can't afford a public standoff. Serafina lifted a hand, calling for calm. "Let's remain methodical. If Dalen is the traitor, he needs a motive. Subverting an alliance this large for personal gain is no small gamble. Someone, maybe a warlord or a rival faction, must be backing him. We should unearth that connection. Meanwhile, we must keep this warship afloat and secure." She focused on Oren, her voice softening. "We also have the archive data. If we share some of those revelations strategically, we might encourage more factions to consider a ceasefire. But the moment Dalen realizes the true extent of what's in our hands, he'll move against us." Avery nodded in agreement. "We'll need to accelerate our efforts with the Allied leaders. Show them glimpses of the uncovered knowledge to prove it's genuine. If enough parties see value in it, perhaps Dalen's sabotage can be contained. He won't be able to stoke fear if the majority stands for peace." For a brief second, Oren locked eyes with Serafina, recalling the hush of the Cipher Archive's sacred chamber. The data in his possession was potent. Wars had started for less. Knowledge of lost treaties and secret supply routes, of emergent technologies and alliances once believed mythical, could shape the galaxy's fate in unpredictable ways. Yet a chance at genuine peace stirred in that trove of secrets, a chance to end cyclical bloodshed. Lucan strode in, perspiration beading on his forehead. "We're about to attempt a partial reactivation of the battered reactor cores," he announced, motioning toward the engineering terminals. "If we can stabilize them, the upper turrets might come online, which should delay any incoming attacks." Serafina acknowledged him. "Good. Once we buy ourselves that breathing room, we'll gather representatives from the factions on board." She pressed a sequence on the holotable, highlighting pockets where Allied forces had taken control. "We can't reach every star system personally, but if the people here see that peace is tangible, word will spread." Stepping away, Oren allowed himself a fleeting sense of hope. The hush that followed was heavy with the knowledge of the risks they courted. In the battered remains of this warship, an extraordinary gamble played out, forging unity amid a war that spanned solar systems. Their success, or failure, would echo long after these corridors fell silent. As preparations for an emergency summit began, Serafina withdrew to a smaller briefing room for a momentary respite. Oren, noticing her absence, followed. He found her standing at a panoramic window that overlooked a vast cargo bay. The space below them teemed with frantic activity, crews offloading medical supplies, engineers welding hull breaches, and security teams marching in tight formations. Ships like giant metal birds perched in docking clamps, battered from recent skirmishes. You should be with the others, Serafina said quietly, sensing his approach. They'll need your strategic input. He stopped beside her, resting a hand on the window frame. They can manage without me for a few minutes. Pausing, he studied her profile in the wan light. Hints of exhaustion etched lines beneath her eyes, perhaps the accumulated toll of centuries, or just the relentless strain of these past few days. For a while, neither spoke. The pulse of the cargo bay and the distant rumbles of the ship's tortured machinery seemed to fill the void where words failed. At last, Serafina broke the silence. I've fought for so long, Oren, that I sometimes wonder if I remember peace correctly. My people, scattered or hidden away, cling to old traditions that might no longer serve them. And yet, I've insisted on reviving these alliances. A bitter paradox, isn't it? Oren pressed his palms together, choosing his words carefully. Every species I've encountered seems burdened by their own contradictions. We unify in adversity, but revert to isolation when times are calm. Maybe this cycle of mistrust is universal, but it doesn't have to be inevitable. She turned her gaze toward him. In the fluorescent lighting, her eyes held a certain vulnerability. When I sensed your presence, when I first touched her hand in that secret hall, I felt warmth I hadn't known for centuries. Perhaps that's why I keep risking so much, trusting so easily. A jolt of recognition thrilled through him. It was the first time she had alluded directly to the mysterious bond that seemed to form when their paths had crossed. The rumors that once swirled about her, cold, calculating, and indifferent to empathy, clashed with the very real empathy she displayed. If our hearts freeze over, the warlords and tyrants win, Oren said, because they feed on our fear, our loneliness. Serafina breathed a slight laugh, albeit tinged with sadness. And yet, in forging alliances, we open ourselves to betrayal. You've witnessed how a single defector can unravel months, or even centuries of effort. His thoughts flickered to the infiltration squads, the encrypted transmissions, and Commander Dalen's probable role. He laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. We keep trying anyway, because the alternative is more of the same. Endless war, endless grief. She inhaled as if drawing strength. Once we hold that summit, I'll reveal aspects of the archive to the representatives. The knowledge of my lineage, my family's entanglements with other species, may come to light. That truth could rattle them. Oren remembered earlier glimpses of cryptic references hinting at Serafina's ancient bloodline, rumored to have shaped entire epochs of political treaties. Then let it rattle them on, he answered. Better we fracture illusions now than continue building on half-truths, even if it means risking more heartbreak. Her hand brushed against his, a silent agreement. The weight of her history pressed upon them both, but in that moment, they stood side by side, two battered souls refusing to let the darkness suffocate hope. The emergency summit was held in the warship's largest functional hangar bay. Makeshift platforms were erected, and rows of hastily arranged chairs welcomed delegates from a patchwork of species. Some wore crisp uniforms battered by the last skirmishes. Others donned armor engraved with clan symbols. An aura of wariness permeated the gathering. Regardless of the outward politeness, the delegates' eyes brimmed with suspicion. Years of conflict left few unscarred by mistrust. Orn and Serafina arrived together, flanked by Lucan, Avery, and Selvik. A low, tense murmur rippled through the crowd upon seeing her. Whether she was revered, feared, or both, none could deny the mystique of the rumored renounced sovereign. Serafina ascended the platform, her gaze traversing the room as though searching for any flicker of genuine goodwill. With a measured breath, she addressed the assembly. Thank you for coming. We stand on the precipice of destruction. One more cataclysmic battle could end us all. But I have in my possession knowledge that could shift this balance of power. My people once forged treaties spanning worlds, yet we saw those treaties crumble under deceit and greed. Today, I offer a chance to rebuild, not on illusions, but on truth. A faint holographic display rose behind her, illuminating star maps reminiscent of the Cipher Archive's data. She revealed glimpses of supply routes once thought lost, potential neutral zones for future talks, and historical precedents of cross-species cooperation. Gasps and hushed exclamations flitted through the crowd. Some delegates seemed intrigued, others more wary. Before she could proceed further, an acrid voice cut through the hush. And why now? How do we know you're not hoarding secrets to manipulate the rest of us? A bearded man named Admiral Cairo, known for his skepticism toward alien alliances, stood challenging her. How many times have peace attempts failed because one side withheld an advantage? Seraphina's lips pressed together, but she met his stare with calm dignity. You have no reason to trust me, she admitted. Trust, unfortunately, must be earned. But do we have time to keep waiting for perfection? We have to start somewhere. Murmurs of agreement countered Cairo's objections, but tension held. Oren stepped forward, feeling the weight of countless eyes. I can vouch for the authenticity of this data, he said. I've seen it myself. We wouldn't be risking our lives to bring you these revelations if we intended exploitation. A hush followed. Admiral Cairo sank back into his chair, grumbling. Seraphina began fielding a few measured questions, attempting to diffuse the cynicism. In that moment, Oren's gaze wandered, scanning the crowd for any sign of Commander Dalen. He didn't see him, which only magnified his suspicion. Where was the man who should have been front and center at such a critical assembly? While Seraphina highlighted bullet points from the archive, another ripple of unease stirred through the throng. Whispers rose as a tall officer slipped in through the side entrance, overshadowed by a squad of troopers. Oren's heart pounded. There stood Dalen, face void of emotion, flanked by men wearing standard uniforms but exuding a chilling aura. Something about the way they carried themselves set alarm bells ringing in Oren's mind, especially when Dalen's gaze landed on Seraphina with a cold, inscrutable intensity. A tense hush descended across the hangar bay. Seraphina paused mid-sentence, her attention zeroing in on Dalen. Every movement seemed heightened, every breath magnified. Delegates fidgeted in their seats, unconsciously recognizing the sudden shift in atmosphere. Dalen's face was oddly calm, giving nothing away of the roiling conflict within him. Apologies for the late arrival, he began. I was concluding some vital communications. His voice carried an undercurrent, a deliberate smoothness that only heightened suspicions. I understand you have opened a trove of knowledge, Seraphina. Are you certain it's waste to share such power so freely? Before Seraphina could respond, a ruckus erupted near the platform. Dalen's men forcibly pulled aside a handful of security officers who tried to intercept them. In the confusion, delegates scrambled away from their seats, forming a growing circle around the confrontation. Oren and Lucan rushed forward, flanking Seraphina protectively. With a sharp gesture, Dalen halted his squad's advance. No need for violence, he declared, though his tone belied his words. I simply have matters to discuss, specifically the presence of an individual who may be leading us astray. Eyes darted between Dalen and Seraphina. Avery and Selvig edged closer, both sets of features drawn tight with tension. When no one spoke, Dalen continued, addressing the delegates. We've heard rumors about Seraphina's lineage. I have proof that her ancestors knowingly orchestrated conflicts between worlds, reaping the benefits of each war they helped ignite. Her legacy is steeped in conspiracy and bloodshed. Genuine shock spread among the assembly. Admiral Cairo, always ready to doubt, stepped forward. Explain yourself, Commander. Dalen nodded, his face unreadable. My sources indicate that Seraphina's family line once presided over treaties that ended in catastrophic betrayal. Thousands perished due to their manipulations. And now she conveniently reveals lost data, claiming it can save us all. How can we be certain she's not continuing that ancient deceit, luring us into a false sense of security before— Enough! Seraphina's voice cut through the uproar. Her hands trembled as she confronted Dalen. Yet she held her chin high. I will not deny the tragic mistakes of my forebears. Our dynasty's long history is marked by both greatness and grave error. But I stand here now in defiance of those old shadows, fighting to prevent the same horrors from repeating. Dalen offered a condescending tilt of his head. Those are noble words, but words alone don't free us from the ghosts of your bloodline. Why should any of us trust you? The delegates looked torn. Some still eyed Seraphina with uncertainty, while others scowled at Dalen for disturbing an already precarious negotiation. Oren stepped forward, anger flaring. Or we could ask, why should we trust you, Dalen? You arrived with armed men, refused to coordinate with the rest of us, and quietly sowed dissent. Is your agenda truly about justice or sabotage? Dalen's gaze flicked to Orin, and for a moment, the tension between them crystallized. Then, with a dismissive shrug, Dalen said, I serve the greater good, Lieutenant. If exposing Seraphina's hidden past will prevent another generation from being manipulated, so be it. A hush lingered. Seraphina exhaled shakily and drew herself up. Perhaps it's time I spoke plainly of the legacy that haunts me, she said, her tone soft yet resonant. Commander Dalen is correct that my ancestors carried out grievous acts. But if you condemn me for their transgressions, then you condemn the future to the same cycle of suspicion and war. Her words, fragile yet fierce, hung in the charged air. The next moments would determine whether their budding alliance would fracture under old sins or find the resilience to transcend them. Silence gripped the makeshift conference in the warship's hangar, broken only by distant engine hums and the restless shifting of uneasy delegates. Seraphina's confession hung in the air like a half-formed constellation, glimmering with unspoken truths, yet threatening to collapse under its own gravity. Her gaze swept over the faces before her, beings of all shapes, from sharp-featured humanoids to reptilian dignitaries, each representing a different corner of the contested galaxy. Some stood rigid in open suspicion, others looked on in hesitant empathy. And at the center of it all, Commander Dalen stood, stoic and unwavering, a living icon of accusation. Orin felt his heartbeat pulse in his ears. He watched Seraphina's shoulders tense, and he recognized how deeply it hurt her to expose the darker chapters of her lineage. Yet she met the delegates' scrutiny with quiet resolve. I do not deny my ancestors played a hand in shaping conflicts, she continued, voice measured. When empires rose and fell, my lineage often stood at critical junctures, sometimes guiding alliances, sometimes fueling aggression. The ancient records do not absolve them. Dalen crossed his arms. Spare us the justifications. If you are truly contrite, you would abandon these so-called secrets and let each species decide its own fate without your family's meddling. A ripple of discord flared in the crowd. Some who were leaning forward in interest recoiled from Dalen's biting tone, while others nodded in agreement. The lines dividing them were so fine. One push could send the entire meeting off a cliff. Seraphina stiffened, but Orin placed a subtle, steadying hand on her arm. When she finally spoke again, her voice resonated with a calm that belied her turmoil. I have no illusions of redemption for my bloodline, she said softly. Nor do I present the Cipher Archive to control your futures. On the contrary, my aim is to spare us all another century of tragedy. If we continue stumbling blindly, repeating old cycles. She paused, letting the gravity settle. Then every sacrifice, every heartbreak will have been in vain. Admiral Cairo stood again, his posture drawn with tension. Suppose we believe your intentions are genuine. It doesn't change that the warlords out there will exploit any advantage they sense. And how do we trust that these records won't fall into their hands the moment we share them? Seraphina looked to Orin, who stepped forward, heart thrumming. Because that's exactly what we're trying to prevent, he said. Commander Dalen's men forced their way in here, armed and ready to sow doubt. We suspect Dalen has been leaking intel to outside forces, trying to sabotage any semblance of unity. If you stand with us, we can lock down the warship's communications, isolate the traitor, and use the truths in the archive to rally more allies, enough to ensure these secrets don't become weapons of mass destruction. A tense murmur rose among the delegates. Some turned to confer in low voices, others glared warily at Dalen. The momentum of the conversation teetered at a precarious tipping point. Seraphina's role as both inheritor of an infamous dynasty and harbinger of new solutions clashed with Dalen's confident narrative of suspicion. Outside, the warship's hull vibrated under a fresh round of distant gunfire. It was a grim reminder that time was running dangerously short. The hostility pressing in from every front demanded a resolution. One that would either bind these disparate factions into an alliance strong enough to force a ceasefire or splinter them once again, plunging the galaxy into deeper darkness. Commander Dalen stepped forward, and an uneasy hush followed. His men stirred, hands resting uneasily on sidearms. "You accuse me of sabotage," he said calmly. "Yet it's I who've been sounding the alarm about Serafina's hidden motives. Isn't it convenient that the moment someone questions her family's history, I'm branded a traitor?" Oren's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. "We intercepted your communication logs. The transmissions match intelligence leaks that preceded enemy attacks in this sector. That's more than coincidence. You'd divert blame to Serafina so that no one questions your role in these incidents." Dalen glanced around, appealing to the delegate's sense of caution. "Look at the chaos in these corridors. Our warship under constant assault, sabotage at every corner. If there is a leak, maybe I've been framed. Have you considered that her archives could be manipulated data? Or that she's engineered these crises for her own ends?" Admiral Cairo frowned, eyes shifting from Dalen to Serafina. Uncertainty flickered across the faces of the crowd. No matter how compelling the evidence against Dalen, fear of the unknown and of a centuries-old family legacy had deep roots. Serafina lifted her chin, drawing upon the quiet strength Oren had seen in her time and again. "I can make this simple for everyone," she announced, tone firm, yet devoid of malice. "Oren, please share the portion of the archive that details the infiltration routes used by the warlords. Let it be known to all." At her nod, Oren produced a small handheld projector, activating a hologram that expanded above the impromptu stage. It displayed glowing lines threading through star charts, hyperspace routes, hidden corridors, and compromised jump points known to the warlords. Beside them were timestamps correlating to recent raids. A subdued gasp rippled through the assembly when they noticed how precisely the infiltrations aligned with the shared intel. Serafina continued, eyes trained on Dalen. "These are the same routes documented in your leaked transmissions, Commander. Our intelligence suggests that you've been feeding these critical navigational data to the warlord Tavalek and his horde. They attack at precisely our weakest junctures." A few of Dalen's men twitched, uncertain whether to raise their weapons or keep to appearances. The delegates pressed closer, collectively sensing the magnitude of this revelation. Lucan, standing near the platform's edge, exchanged a knowing look with Oren. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. For an instant, it looked as though Dalen might capitulate, that the weight of proof would crush his denials. But he only smiled, a thin, resigned curve of the lips. "You think Tavalek is the only threat? You're too naive, Felmore. There are powers moving beyond your comprehension, and Tavalek is simply a mercenary who trades in aggression. We had an arrangement." Anger flared in Oren. "You sold out the entire crew, the negotiations, everything, just for some arrangement?" Dalen shrugged. "Not just any arrangement, one that promised a new galactic order, free from petty alliances and centuries-old intrigues. Perhaps you all are so blinded by your trust in this so-called queen that you fail to see the bigger game." His final words landed like a spark in a munitions cache, sending murmurs of alarm through the gathering. Serafina glanced sideways at Oren, her expression caught between fury and sorrow. One traitor might be bad enough, but Dalen's allusion to powers beyond comprehension hinted at a conspiracy that reached even further than they feared. The delegates erupted in confusion. Some demanded Dalen's immediate arrest, others shouted about verifying the authenticity of the displayed routes, and still more voiced alarm over potential infiltration by unknown outside forces. As if on cue, the ship rumbled with renewed vigor, the low thrumming of distant detonations rolling through the bulkheads. Harsh overhead lights flickered, plunging parts of the hangar into half-darkness. Serafina raised her voice above the clamor. "Glintwick!" The single word carried a resonance that commanded attention. Even Dalen's men momentarily paused, uncertain whether to act. She stepped down from the platform, approaching Dalen with a measured stride that brimmed with confidence. "Whatever you and your patrons aim to achieve," she said calmly, "I will not let you destroy the hope we have labored so hard to build." A flicker of annoyance crossed Dalen's face, but he masked it swiftly. "You overestimate the value of your hope, Serafina. This galaxy's power brokers answer to more than rosters of alliances. And trust me, once they have what they need, they'll crush those naive enough to stand in their way." Nearby, Lucan rallied a squad of security officers who began to surround Dalen's group. Weapons remained holstered, but tension flashed in the officers' eyes, their hands brushing ominously against sidearms. Admiral Cairo, though mistrustful of Serafina, appeared equally alarmed by Dalen's brazen confessions. He strode forward, voice taut. Commander, we gave you rank and responsibility aboard this ship. If you truly stand against the Alliance, I suggest you lay down your arms. We can settle these matters under a proper tribunal. Dalen's responding laugh was low and humorless. A tribunal? In the midst of this madness? I doubt you'll live long enough to convene one. He gestured to his men. We're done here. Suddenly, in a coordinated flurry, Dalen's squad activated small disruption devices strapped to their belts. In an instant, an electromagnetic pulse rippled through the hangar, making the overhead lights stutter violently. Several delegates cried out as comm units went dead, and a few security turrets along the walls sparked and fizzled. Oren nearly lost his footing. He saw Dalen turn sharply, heading toward an auxiliary hatch leading to the warship's labyrinth of corridors. "They're making a break for it," Oren shouted. He motioned frantically to Lucan and Serafina, urging them to follow. The delegates parted in alarm, some brandishing sidearms, others scrambling for cover. No longer bothering with subtlety, Dalen's men opened fire in short bursts, forcing the crowd to scatter. Serafina dodged a shot that sizzled mere inches from her arm, her robes fluttering in the sudden wind of the discharge. Without hesitation, she and Orn launched into pursuit as Dalen's entourage disappeared through the hatch, leaving panic in their wake. Behind them, the hangar descended into chaos. Disrupted electronics crackled ominously. Delegates who had come seeking hope were now left reeling, frightened by the sudden escalation. Lucan barked orders to maintain order and treat any injured, while Admiral Cairo tried to regain a semblance of control. But at that moment, all that truly mattered was ensuring Dalen didn't escape and deliver the archive data to whatever higher power lurked behind his treachery. The chase through the corridors played out like a frantic waltz of flickering lights and echoing footsteps. Alarm klaxons blared intermittently, the ship's compromised systems struggling to recover from Dalen's EMP blast. Oren kept pace beside Serafina, her presence steady and determined despite the swirl of tension. Neither spoke much, saving their breaths for the desperate pursuit. At every corner, they found fresh evidence of Dalen's passage. Fallen security personnel groaning in disorientation, lights shorted out, doors forced open. A thin haze of smoke from overloaded circuit panels hung in the air. More than once, they heard the tread of boots echo down a side corridor, but arrived seconds too late to intercept. Amid the twisting rotes, Selvig and Avery joined them, having navigated an alternate passage to cut Dalen off. The four pressed on, hearts pounding. They reached a branching hallway illuminated by sporadic flashes of red emergency beacons. "He's headed to the primary docking module," Selvig said, panting. "Likely trying to escape in a shuttle or override an external hatch." Serafina's expression darkened. "If Dalen escapes, the entire galaxy is at risk. He has enough knowledge of the archive to barter alliances with the most dangerous warlords." Quickening their pace, they emerged into a high-ceilinged loading bay. Rows of supply crates stood like monoliths in the half-dark, while overhead gantries clanked with mechanical arms used for cargo transfers. The hiss of pneumatic doors alerted them to Dalen's location. He and a handful of loyalists were attempting to override the external lock on a personnel shuttle. A gunmetal ramp extended half-lowered from the shuttle's flank, revealing a dim interior. Dalen glanced back, cursing under his breath at the sight of Serafina and Oren. "Stall them!" he barked at his men. Immediately, a volley of plasma shots lit the bay. Serafina and Avery dived behind a stack of crates, while Oren and Selvig rolled in the opposite direction, returning fire. The acrid scent of burned metal filled the air. At one point, Selvig managed to disable one of Dalen's henchmen, the shot hurling the foe against a crate with a resounding crash. In the stuttering glow of the failing overhead lights, Oren saw Dalen working feverishly at the shuttle's access panel. If he succeeded, the traitor and his secrets would vanish into the stars. Serafina peeked around the crate, eyes narrowing in resolve. She extended her hand, activating a compact device that emitted a pulse of shimmering energy, an innovation from her people's lost technology. The shimmering pulse crackled through the loading bay, momentarily distorting the visuals. Dalen's men wavered, stunned as if caught in a wave of vertigo. Oren seized that chance, sprinting toward them. But Dalen, sensing the sudden shift, slammed a hand on the panel, causing the shuttle's ramp to start retracting. He lunged aboard, eyes blazing with a furious triumph. "You'll regret this," he snarled. "The future belongs to those not mired in ancient delusions." With a groan of metal, the shuttle hatch began to seal. Time slowed in Orin's perception. One chance remained. He lunged at the ramp, determined to prevent it from closing. The clang of his boots echoed as he reached for any handhold, but Dalen's men pivoted, unleashing defensive fire. A shot whined off the ramp, nearly hitting Orin's leg. Suddenly, a flicker of dark fabric moved beside Orin. Seraphina, forsaking her cover to charge across open ground. The flash of plasma riddled the air, but she moved with an almost preternatural agility, aided by her device's residual distortion effect. A streak of sizzling light grazed her shoulder, tearing the edge of her robe. A sharp gasp escaped her lips, yet she pressed on. Within 2 heartbeats, she and Orin converged on the ramp. Orin struck the control panel just as it was about to seal them out. Sparks flew, and the door froze mid-close, leaving a jagged gap large enough for a person to slip through. Dalen's men scrambled, firing frantically. One bolt scorched the cargo bay's floor near Orin's feet. He grit his teeth, returning fire with rapid precision, keeping them pinned. Seraphina squeezed through the gap first, Orin following close behind. Inside, the shuttle's interior lighting flickered, casting harsh shadows. They found themselves in a narrow corridor leading to the pilot's cabin. Farther ahead, Dalen's footsteps thundered on the metal floor. Deeper inside, machinery hummed as the engines powered up for an unauthorized launch. "I'll cut him off," Seraphina whispered, voice tight with pain from her wounded arm. "Make sure the engines don't spool. If he takes off—" Her words trailed, but their shared understanding was clear. None of them could allow Dalen to leave. Orin gave a quick nod. Splitting up, they navigated the cramped passages. Orin aiming for the access ladder that led to the engine room, Seraphina pressing on toward the cockpit. Now separated, Orin realized that in the labyrinth of the shuttle, they were both more vulnerable. He pressed forward, determined to disable the engines before Dalen escaped. Meanwhile, Seraphina advanced down a sloped corridor, ignoring the sting in her shoulder. Her mind buzzed with memories of her family's transgressions, scenes she had relived too many times, echoing with accusations of betrayal. As she pressed deeper into the shuttle, she caught sight of Dalen at the far end of the corridor. He was hunched over a control panel, attempting to bypass the lock she had partially jammed. He looked up, eyes narrowing. "Even if you stop me, Seraphina, others will come. War is as inevitable as the cosmic cycles. You can't just wash away the sins of the past with good intentions." Her breath caught, more from the raw truth in his words than from exertion. "I know better than most that the past isn't so easily undone," she replied, voice echoing in the cramped metal hallway. "But if we do nothing, if we choose cynicism and fear, the only outcome is more devastation." Dalen's lips curled into a sneer. "Idealistic fool. My arrangement is with forces who understand power. Once they reshape this fractured galaxy, your antiquated beliefs won't matter." He slammed a button, and a hidden blast door hissed, cutting off her direct path to him. Seraphina placed her palm on the sealed hatch, cursing under her breath. She keyed her comm to Orin. "He's blocked me out. Get those engines offline before he overrides the lock." Down in the bowels of the shuttle, Orin wrenched a console panel open, sweat beading on his forehead. The engine readouts flickered, indicating the thrusters were close to firing sequence. If Dalen managed to rewire the blast doors and reach the cockpit, they'd be lost. With frantic hands, Orin tore out wiring, bypassed fuses, and punched override codes into the subconsole. The engine hum died abruptly, replaced by a sputtering whine that rattled the metal hull. Orin let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. An array of red lights now blinked on the control board, indicating the shuttle's propulsion had been forcibly halted. If Dalen wanted to launch, he'd have to fix multiple system failures first, buying them precious minutes. Yet as Orin straightened, footsteps thundered behind him. One of Dalen's henchmen, a tall figure with a half-shaved scalp and an electronic visor, appeared in the narrow engine corridor. The henchman raised a pistol and fired without hesitation. Orin dived behind a support strut, the shot singeing the air where he'd stood seconds earlier. In the cramped space, the firefight became a deadly game of angles. Orin returned fire, each shot illuminating the gloom with momentary flashes. The smell of ozone and melted circuitry choked the corridor. With agile footwork, the henchman pressed forward, pinning Orin against an engine console. Another bolt fizzled past, grazing Orin's shoulder plate. Pain flared across his nerves. Seizing a momentary lull, Orin lunged, using the butt of his sidearm to knock the henchman's weapon aside. They wrestled in a flurry of elbows and jarring impacts against metal panels. The henchman proved stronger than Orin expected, nearly slamming him into a tangle of exposed wiring. But Orin twisted free at the last second, then delivered a sharp blow to the man's temple. The henchman collapsed with a gasp, sliding into unconsciousness. Breathing heavily, Orin bound the downed foe's wrists with a spare cable. The hiss and crackle of damaged electronics surrounded him, but the immediate threat was neutralized. He checked the panel once more to ensure the engines remained offline. Thankfully, they did. Now to regroup with Serafina. On the shuttle's upper level, Serafina managed to pry open an alternative hatch leading around the blast door. She slipped through a side passage, emerging onto a walkway that overlooked the cockpit's entrance. Down below, Dalen was furiously operating a console. She recognized, with a pang of dread, the pilot override system. If he rerouted enough power, he might circumvent Orin's sabotage. "Dalen!" Serafina's voice echoed off the metal walkways. "Step away from the console. This ends here." He glanced up, eyes reflecting the soft glow of warning lights. "So determined to play the heroine," he snarled. "I wonder, do your people know the full extent of your family's blood price? The lives extinguished under your ancestors' unholy bargains?" His words struck home, but she refused to show weakness. "I carry those sins like scars," she said, carefully descending a set of stairs. "And it's precisely because I've seen how power can corrupt that I won't let you feed the galaxy into the jaws of more war." Dalen's expression hardened. He pulled a sleek pistol from his side, aiming at Serafina. She froze, eyes locked on the muzzle. His finger tensed on the trigger. Just then, Orin burst onto the walkway, brandishing his own weapon. A standoff crystallized. Serafina standing below, Dalen pivoting the pistol from her to Orin. Orin drawing a bead on Dalen. All three breathed in ragged unison, the shuttle's sirens pulsing a somber beat in the background. A static-laden hush fell over the shuttle. Only the alarm klaxons and the distant groan of the warship's hull broke the silence. Orin's gaze flickered from Serafina, unwavering but cornered, to Dalen's trembling gun hand. A single slip of the trigger could end her life. "You won't leave this ship," Orin said, voice firm. His own sidearm was leveled at Dalen, though sweat beaded at his temple. "The engines are down, and you're out of options. Surrender." Dalen's eyes burned with fierce conviction. He glanced at Serafina, at Orin, then at the console's flickering error messages. Slowly, he backed away from the controls. "You fool," he hissed. "Even if you kill me, there are others waiting in the wings, those who see your alliance as weakness. They will bring this galaxy to its knees." A flicker of sadness crossed Serafina's face. "Perhaps they will try," she said softly. "But every step we take toward unity, every act of mercy, drains power from those who profit off fear. You'll never understand because you've already chosen hatred over hope." Dalen's pistol lowered an inch, doubt creeping into his eyes. That was all the opening Orin needed. He lunged forward, batting the weapon aside. A scuffle erupted, pistols skidding across the floor, Dalen grappling at Orin's arms. Serafina darted in, ignoring the pain in her wounded shoulder, to help subdue the traitor. It wasn't a graceful fight. Dalen managed to slam Orin's back into a metal railing, nearly sending him over the edge. Serafina grabbed Dalen's wrist, twisting until he released Orin. With a final shove, they pinned Dalen against the console, breathing hard. Gritting his teeth, Dalen struggled, but Serafina's grip held firm. "Stand down," Orin barked, pressing his forearm against Dalen's chest. "This ends now." Chest heaving, Dalen glared at them both. The fury in his stare flickered with something like resignation. For a moment, it seemed he might try a last act of defiance. But then his muscles slackened. The fight drained from him, replaced by a bitter scowl. "You're deluded, both of you," and he spat. "This galaxy only respects strength. Unity is an illusion." A sorrowful expression ghosted over Serafina's features. "What you call Delusion, I call courage, she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. You may never believe it, but we'll keep fighting to prove that compassion is stronger than tyranny. They secured Dalen's wrists with steel binders. Orin tapped his comlink, thankfully still operational in the shuttle's partial gloom, and called for a security team. We've got the commander detained, he said, relief catching in his throat. Engines are disabled. Extraction needed ASAP. Outside, the battered warship's corridors still trembled with distant clashes. But a sense of turning the tide settled upon Orin and Serafina. Once Dalen was in custody, the infiltration efforts would slow, and the summit's delegates might realize that renewed unity was possible. Exhaustion weighed on them as they escorted Dalen out of the shuttle, his eyes smoldering with unrepentant rage. Yet within that bleak glare, Orin perceived the faint outlines of a new dawn. War might not end overnight, but this victory, however small, was proof that the seeds of peace had taken root, and perhaps, for once, might truly bloom. The following days passed in a blur of reconstruction. Dalen was confined to a fortified cell under constant guard. Meanwhile, word spread throughout the ship and beyond of his sabotage and the plot he served. Rumors circulated that he had connections to shadowy figures across the galaxy, but every attempt to track them led to dead ends. Perhaps they would show themselves later, or perhaps the arrest of their agent forced them back into hiding. Either way, the immediate threat had been quelled. Serafina wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. Gathering the delegates once more, albeit warily, she displayed fresh evidence from the archives, carefully releasing pieces that underscored the latent strengths in cross-species alliance. Many listened with newfound openness. Though centuries of distrust did not vanish overnight, the revelations, combined with Dalen's betrayal, stirred a cautious solidarity. Skeptical voices like Admiral Cairo asked pointed questions, but they no longer held absolute sway. While Lucan coordinated the warship's repairs, Avery and Selvig opened a communications link with other fleets, offering glimpses of potential treaties. Slowly, outposts that had been wary or outright hostile softened their stances, intrigued by the possibility of genuine peace. The presence of medics and relief caravans, enabled by Serafina's knowledge of safe passageways, cemented a fragile but meaningful shift. Fewer shots were fired in anger. Soldiers on different sides began exchanging supplies and tending each other's wounded instead of trading blaster fire. In a reflection of this new spirit, a half-dozen disparate ambassadors approached Serafina to propose an interfleet council, something not seen in generations. Orin, witnessing the momentum, felt a swell of hope. This is how it begins, he thought, with a single spark that illuminates a corridor of shadows. That spark manifested most personally between him and Serafina. Despite the chaos of organizing talks and stabilizing the ship, they found quiet moments to share their triumphs and doubts. One night, as the warship's engines rumbled in low power mode, they stood on the observation deck, watching a distant star cluster spill radiant light across the void. Their shoulders brushed, a familiar warmth blooming where fabric met skin. You made me believe, Serafina whispered, her eyes reflecting the glimmer of constellations. Not just in the possibility of peace, but in the notion that even old wounds can heal. Orin felt his pulse quicken. You taught me what real leadership looks like, he replied, voice soft. Not just issuing orders, but sacrificing, guiding, and caring enough to risk everything for a chance at unity. I'll never forget that. They lingered in that hush, neither needing more words. The distant swirl of galaxies reminded them how small they were, yet how immense their shared endeavor had become. In the corridor of cosmic timelines, their stand against the cycle of war was a small but shining pivot. The future remained uncertain, threatened by hidden warlords and fractious histories. But in that moment, they had each other, and the promise that compassion, once awakened, could outshine even the coldest stars. And so, in the quiet company of those forging a new era, the Queen of Shadows found her first enduring warmth. In the hushed symphony of 1,000 repaired alliances and 1,000,000 second chances, the seeds of a genuine peace took root, determined to bloom beneath those ancient, watchful stars. From my perspective, the journey we've witnessed isn't just about grand battles and interstellar politics. It's a testament to how empathy and faith can unite disparate worlds. Through every betrayal and every hard-won alliance, these characters discovered a truth that resonates far beyond their war-torn galaxy. When hope and compassion intertwine, no obstacle is insurmountable. Seeing former enemies lay down their arms to protect each other and watching trust grow from painful secrets is a reminder of our own capacity for unity. I believe this story ends on a brilliant note of promise, one that invites us to imagine a future where differences become strengths rather than weaknesses. If you have thoughts or questions, I encourage you to leave a comment and share your perspective. Let's continue the discussion and keep the spark of hope alive for the next great adventure.